Heightening tensions. Days after Congress approves sanctions against Russia, Moscow reacts by kicking out hundreds of diplomats. What it means for the U.S. A new chief of staff. President Trump welcomes General John Kelly to the White House after another shakeup in the Trump administration. Unrest in Venezuela. Violent protests across the country after a vote giving the country's ruling party virtually unlimited powers. How the U.S. is responding. And the Pope's appeal.
Questo è brutto, è crudele, è criminale.
The Holy Father urges the world to end what he calls a form of modern slavery. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, July 31st, 2017. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. We begin with a developing story at the White House. Anthony Scaramucci is out, less than 2 weeks into his role as White House Communications Director. It comes as President Donald Trump convenes his cabinet for a kickoff meeting with the new Chief of Staff, General John Kelly. Correspondent Mark Irons is at the White House with the details. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. A surprising announcement this afternoon from the White House that newly appointed Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci is out. In a statement, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders says Anthony Scaramucci will be leaving his role as White House Communications Director. Mr. Scaramucci felt it was best to give Chief of Staff John Kelly a clean slate and the ability to build his own team. We wish him all the best. It comes hours after President Trump called the new Chief of Staff, John Kelly, a fantastic leader during today's cabinet meeting.
We just swore in General Kelly. He will do a spectacular job, I have no doubt.
The retired Marine general begins work at a White House some critics have called chaotic, amidst the stalled legislative agenda, personnel changes, and investigations. President Trump denies any chaos, but hopes the four-star general will bring the military order he provided at the Department of Homeland Security to the White House.
We respect him, admire what he's done, and at Homeland, what he has done has been nothing short of miraculous. As you know, the border was a tremendous problem.
Kelly's success will depend on how much authority he is granted and whether the president's aides can work together. Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney spoke out in support of Kelly.
I'm actually looking forward to working with John Kelly. He's been a tremendous Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I've enjoyed working with him for the last 6 months, and I'm actually excited about the next several months.
Kelly's predecessor also had favorable words for the new Chief of Staff. Reince Priebus will stay on for a period of transition.
This is not like a situation where there's a bunch of ill will feelings. This is, I think, good for the president. I think it's smart for him to pick General Kelly.
Senate Democrat Joe Manchin says Kelly is held in high regard by Democrats and Republicans.
I was on the armed services for 6 years, and he came before us many times, and we just truly enjoyed having him. He was always forthright, straight talking.
Ultimately, the final judge will be President Trump.
I predict that General Kelly will go down in terms of the position of Chief of Staff, one of the great ever.
And Anthony Scaramucci's exit 11 days into his new job. The first sign showing that Chief of Staff Kelly may have the authority he needs to run a tight ship in the West Wing. Wyatt?
Mark, the White House has several hot-button issues on their agenda right now. Did these play a role in the selection of General Kelly as Chief of Staff?
President Trump applauded General Kelly's work in Homeland Security, particularly along the southern border. He will certainly rely on some of those same skills as he guides the president on matters related to Russia and perhaps even more importantly, North Korea.
And we'll be watching. Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thanks, Mark. President Trump presents the country's highest honor to an Army medic from Michigan who risked his life multiple times to rescue Vietnam War soldiers.
Today, we pay tribute to a veteran who went above and beyond the call of duty to protect our comrades, our country, and our freedom.
James McLuhan was honored today at the White House. He's the first person to receive the Medal of Honor from President Trump. McLuhan was 23 years old when he voluntarily entered the kill zone in Vietnam to save injured colleagues. The now 71-year-old described the battle as the worst 2 days of his life. Russian President Vladimir Putin slashes the staff at America's embassy, part of a growing diplomatic fight after the U.S. Congress slaps Russia with new sanctions. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi tells us what this means for U.S.-Russia relations. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. The high-stakes diplomatic standoff intensifies tonight. The huge cut in diplomatic workers harkens back to the Cold War, but Vice President Mike Pence warns Russia, back off.
At this very moment, Russia continues to seek to redraw international borders by force, undermine democracies of sovereign nations.
Vice President Mike Pence says President Trump will not accept Russian threats. Pence stands today with three of Russia's neighbors, the presidents of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
And no threat looms larger in the Baltic states than the specter of aggression from your unpredictable neighbor to the east.
The U.S. Congress overwhelmingly voted to punish Russia for its aggression in neighboring Ukraine and for its meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, charges Russia denies. The White House announced the president will sign the new sanctions, which target Russian banks, oil companies, and cybersecurity. Russian President Vladimir Putin retaliates by ordering the United States to remove 755 diplomatic workers and shuttering 2 American embassy properties.
We have waited quite a long time and thought something might change for the better. We had hoped that the situation will somehow change, but apparently if it changes, it won't be soon.
Russian critic Bill Browder says the Russian move is textbook Putin.
His big thing is to look like a strong man in his country. The number of diplomats who have been expelled, 755, is 20 times the number of diplomats that the U.S. expelled from Washington, D.C. as a result of election hacking.
Russia wants the American embassy workers gone by September 1st, leaving behind just 455 employees, the same number Russia has here in the United States. Wyatt?
Jason, aside from all these issues surrounding Europe in particular, what does this mean for other U.S.-Russia ties, the other issues the two countries work together on?
They'll still be working together on programs like energy, space travel, as well as Syrian peace. But it's likely Russia will be more reluctant to help the United States in its bid to punish North Korea for its nuclear missile ambitions.
Which is another problem on the horizon. Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jason. The White House is insisting the Senate resume efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare, signaling President Trump stands ready to end required payments to insurers this week to let Obamacare implode and force congressional action. He took to Twitter this morning saying if Obamacare is hurting people, and it is, why shouldn't it hurt the insurance companies, and why should Congress not be paying what public pays? While the House has begun a 5-week recess, the Senate is scheduled to work 2 more weeks before a summer break. The Trump administration is preparing to levy new sanctions on Venezuela in response to a weekend election that gives the South American country's ruling party virtually unlimited powers. It comes amid major protests and violence. A major explosion on the streets of Venezuela Sunday. Protesters attacked National Guardsmen as troops were guarding voting stations for the country's controversial election. One officer set ablaze by the blast. Government officials say more than 8 million people voted. President Nicolas Maduro now has the right to remove the country's legislative body and replace it with a new institution able to rewrite its constitution.
The first vote for peace. The first vote for the independence and sovereignty of Venezuela. And the first vote for the future tranquility of Venezuela.
But there's been little peace or tranquility in Venezuela over the past few months. The Venezuelan Attorney General's office says at least 125 people were killed during the unrest. Many nations, including the U.S., have condemned Venezuela's election. President Trump says the United States will not stand by as Venezuela crumbles. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley called the Venezuelan election another step toward dictatorship. And Catholic bishops in the country called the vote useless, unnecessary, and damaging to the Venezuelan people. Residents, meanwhile, hope for the best.
I continue here in Venezuela because I love my country.
Extra security measures are in place at Sydney Airport after Australian authorities foiled an alleged airplane terror plot. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says it was an elaborate conspiracy to bring down a plane. 4 men are in custody, but police have yet to link the foiled plan to a specific terrorist group. Authorities say they continue to conduct searches. No one has been charged at this time. ISIS targets the Iraqi embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, with a suicide bomber blowing himself up outside the gates. Three other gunmen were killed by Afghan special forces. The battle between the attackers and the military lasted nearly 4 hours. All the diplomats were brought to a safe haven, and no one was injured during the attack. A priest in Colombia is killed on his 31st birthday. A Vatican news agency says Father Chavarria Perez was killed Thursday in northern Colombia. The priest did not show up for Mass, so worried parishioners looked for him and found him dead in the rectory. The cause of the death and possible suspects are not known. Pope Francis makes an appeal for an end to human trafficking.
Sono vittime innocenti dello sfruttamento lavorativo e sessuale e del traffico di organi.
During the Holy Father's weekly Angelus address, he called on the faithful to join him in saying a Hail Mary to convert the hearts of traffickers. High-ranking Vatican officials have long shined the spotlight on human trafficking. The Pontifical Academy for Sciences hosted a meeting in 2014 aimed at combating the problem around the world. Our EWTN Rome office spoke to the director of the Academy, who told our producer why it's so important to bring this topic to the world's attention.
The crime against humanity is, for example, slaves. And for Pope Francis, this human trafficking is like the new form of slaves in all his forms, both in forced labor. There are many people today be slave as forced labor because have a labor that not have any dignity and time. And also for Pope Francis, the other new form of slaves is the prostitution. And again, the other form is the traffic of organ trafficking. And this, more or less, today, the estimation of the people who are victims of this new form of slaves are 60 million of people in all the world.
The massive outbreak of Ebola in 2014 left more than 11,000 dead in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. While the outbreak was declared over last year, the fever has left about 12,000 orphans. Lauren Ashburn spoke with our next guest, who is speaking with members of Congress to raise awareness for the forgotten victims from the Ebola crisis.
Joining us now is Father Peter Conte of Caritas, a Catholic group dedicated to helping the poor, and he is based in Sierra Leone. Thank you for joining us here from Capitol Hill. Can you paint a picture of what the orphanage crisis is like in Sierra Leone?
Oh, definitely. You know, Sierra Leone has gone through two major crises, and that is civil war for 11 years, and then Ebola. And the after effect of both crises is that you find a lot of orphans, first after the war, and over 6,000 after Ebola. So we have been facing a crisis in which children have been most affected, and therefore there are a lot of orphans around, just sleeping in the street and all over.
It's horrible. How is Caritas helping them?
Well, Caritas has been in the forefront, both from after the war, to resettle these orphans and to find families to take them. After Ebola, the orphans were in a very challenging situation, because they were stigmatized, and so it was very difficult to place them into families. And therefore, Caritas, with the help of the Healy Foundation and partners who support us through the Healy Foundation, we set up homes. There are some that we keep in homes, there are some that we keep in communities, and so that they will ensure that they experience love and care.
What are you hoping that Congress can do to help?
Well, first of all, my presence here is one of gratitude in the solidarity and love that we have received. But secondly is to remind, many times after crisis, when the camera is off you, people forget you. And so it's a reminder that even though Ebola is not being transmitted now, but the effect that we see is even worse. And so we need constant support. And so it's that reminder, because there's a tendency when you are not in the headlines, when you are not in the news, people forget.
Right.
So it's a reminder and a gratitude trip.
Which is exactly why we are talking to you today. Father Peter Conte, thank you for all of the work that you do on behalf of these orphans.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to share our story.
Coming up, a new report claims teen abortions and teen births have risen in Texas since the state removed funding for Planned Parenthood. But some say that's a misleading narrative. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A federal judge blocks Arkansas from enforcing 4 new pro-life laws. The laws include a ban on second trimester abortion procedure, already banned in other states, and new restrictions on disposing fetal tissue. The new measures were set to take effect tomorrow. The Texas Senate passes a bill to ban general insurance policies from covering abortions. The bill would still allow for coverage of abortions that are considered medically necessary to save a woman's life. The state has passed some of the strongest abortion restrictions in the U.S. and has become a hotbed of abortion controversy in the past few years. The bill will now head to the Texas House for consideration. If you want more details on the bill, you can read more about it right now at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A new study out by an economics professor at Miami University claims that teen abortions and teen births have risen in the state of Texas since 2011. That's when the state removed funding to Planned Parenthood. My next guest believes this is a misleading narrative. We welcome in Michael New, associate scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute, who has written about this study. He also served as a postdoctoral fellow at the Harvard MIT Data Center. So, Michael, the report argues that the cuts to the Texas family planning programs increase both teen births and teen abortions, but you argue that the number of Texas minorities in that is going down. Why such a discrepancy?
Well, the study is interesting, and what the author does find is that some demographically similar counties outside of Texas saw larger declines in both teen births and teen abortions. But the problem is the way the media is reporting on this study. I think casual readers of media coverage would conclude that teen abortions and teen births are going up in Texas, and in reality, that's absolutely not the case.
You tell us why you believe this study, which also claims teen pregnancies and epidemic in Texas, is not true.
Because we have good data from the Texas Department of State Health. And between 2011 and 2014, teen abortions have gone down by about 47%. Teen births have gone down by 24%. So the notion there's this teen pregnancy epidemic in Texas is just completely false, that the media is not reporting on these positive health trends.
Like you say, the mainstream media appears to be taking at least one side in this, reporting there would be some 20,000 unplanned births, for example. In your experience, how do you think this kind of reporting is bad overall for the pro-life movement?
Well, it's very frustrating that Texas took the lead in defunding Planned Parenthood in 2011, and I think the media, hoping to discredit efforts to cut off federal funding for Planned Parenthood and cut off funding for Planned Parenthood elsewhere, has tried to create this misleading narrative of a public health crisis in Texas. And it's been very misleading. They've taken a lot of studies out of context. In some cases, people have just made up figures out of whole cloth to try to discredit what's going on in Texas. But in reality, most public health trends there are quite positive.
And like you say, people who just read this study offhand may just not know. It's interesting that this study will actually be published in the Journal of Health Economics. Does that validate the study in your view?
Well, the good thing about academic research is that the data will become publicly available once the study comes out. So the data will be available, and I think other researchers with an interest in this topic will get a chance to do some writing and research on it. And I think at the end of the day, we will get probably a clear picture of what's happening to teen pregnancies in Texas.
Well, like I say, that's important that we get that information out there. And obviously, we appreciate your work with the Charlotte Lozier Institute and giving us the context for this. Michael New, Associate Professor, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, the Courage and Encourage Conference. We'll speak to the Executive Director of Courage International about the group's annual conference for persons with same-sex attractions. Today, the church honors St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. Before he died in 1556, the Jesuits opened 35 schools and boasted 1,000 members. Today, membership is more than 16,000, including Pope Francis. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Catholics across the country come together to celebrate a church ministry that helps people with same-sex attractions live a Christian life. This past weekend, the Courage and Encourage Conference celebrated their 30th anniversary, filled with fellowship and prayer. To tell us more about the conference, we welcome Father Philip Bachansky, the Executive Director of Courage International, joining us via Skype. Father, give us an overview of what people learn when they attend the conference, specifically how we as people of faith should understand same-sex attraction.
Well, the Church wants us to understand same-sex attraction from the point of view of chastity, which the Catechism defines as the successful integration of sexuality into the big picture of who a person is, our identity, our vocation, our life of virtue, our life with Christ. And so our Courage Conference welcomes our Courage and Encourage members to talk about chastity, but also to talk about virtue, to learn from the lives of the saints, to talk about family dynamics and how we grow in friendship. We celebrate liturgy together and just have a lot of time for fellowship as well. So it's kind of that multifaceted approach that the Church asks for in this regard that helps people to say, yeah, this is an experience that I have, and I'm glad that we can help one another by sharing our experiences and also grow in chaste friendship so that we develop our life of faith together and develop that friendship with Christ.
You say the experience of same-sex attraction has a profound impact not just on the life of the individual, but that person's family, friends, and the life of the church. What exactly do you mean by that?
From the perspective of parents especially and other family members, from the moment that they know that that they're expecting a child, let alone from the time that the child's born, parents have dreams and plans for their children. They kind of see their children's life unfolding, and every parent knows that their children's plans aren't necessarily going to be what theirs were, but I think at the heart of it, every parent wants to know that their child is going to be safe and happy and live a life in union with Christ and the Church. When a son or daughter tells their parents that they're experiencing same-sex attraction or that they're identifying as gay, oftentimes that also means that they're moving away somewhat from the practice of the faith. It can be a real shock to the parents to think, well, so what does this mean for my child's future? And what can I do? Sometimes the parents have kind of an emergency room mentality. You know, something's wrong. How do I fix it? And so we have a part of our apostolate called Encourage, which brings together those parents and other family members to say, first of all, we're not looking to fix anything. We're looking to understand this experience from the perspective of the son or daughter who is going through it, to entrust our plans for them to the plan that God has for our families, and to help one another to understand, how do I keep the faith and keep lines of communication open, keep our family bonds intact.
Such an important message and an important ministry that you do. Father Philip Bachansky, Executive Director of Courage International, thanks so much for talking to us about it.
Thank you.
To learn more about the apostolate and their ministry, you can check out their website at couragerc.org. Finally tonight, the Knights of Columbus is getting ready to hold its international convention as the group continues to stand up against Christian persecution. It's taking place in St. Louis tomorrow and is one of the largest gatherings of Catholic bishops in the country. You can watch comprehensive coverage of the convention, including the opening Mass tomorrow, right here on EWTN, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. Well, that does it for us for tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back here tomorrow for more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.